Simplicity creates power. It's one of those truths that sounds obvious when you hear it, but in practice it's the hardest thing to achieve. Most people mistake complexity for sophistication. They think that if they add more features, more layers, more options, they're making something better. But the reality is that every extra piece you add is another source of confusion, another decision for the user, another burden for the creator. True power comes not from adding, but from subtracting. The less there is, the more focus remains on what truly matters. When you encounter a truly great product, it feels inevitable. You look at it and think, of course, it had to be this way. And that sense of inevitability doesn't come from the product being overdesigned. It comes from it being stripped down to its essence. Think about the iPhone when it first came out. No manual, no instructions. Just one button, you tapped it, and everything you needed was inside. That wasn't an accident. That was the result of thousands of choices to remove everything unnecessary. The simplicity is what gave it power. Simplicity is powerful because it reduces friction. The human brain doesn't like friction. Every extra decision we have to make, every bit of clutter we encounter, every confusing interface, it all drains our mental energy. A simple product feels like an extension of ourselves. We don't have to think about how to use it, we just use it. Google's homepage is the perfect example. One field, one action, search. You don't need instructions. You don't need onboarding. You don't need explanation. That clarity is why billions of people use it every single day without thinking twice. But simplicity is not the same as minimalism for its own sake. Simplicity means finding the core truth of what you're building and delivering only that. It means ignoring everything else, no matter how tempting it may be. That's why simplicity is hard. It requires discipline. It requires saying no. It requires the courage to strip away cleverness and ego and stand behind something pure. Most people can't do that. They keep piling on features and gimmicks, and the product gets weaker, not stronger. There's also a deeper layer to simplicity. It reveals truth. When something is simple, it becomes transparent. You can see it for what it is. There's nowhere to hide. If a product is weak, simplicity will expose it. But if it's strong, if it solves a real problem in an elegant way, simplicity will amplify it. Think about Twitter in the early days. The 140 character limit wasn't a flaw. It was the essence of the product. That single constraint gave the platform its identity. By keeping it simple, it became powerful. If they had allowed unlimited characters from the start, it would have just been another blogging tool. The same principle applies outside of products. In communication, the most powerful ideas are the simplest ones. Play long-term games with long-term people. That's Naval Ravikant in one line, simple but packed with wisdom. You don't need a 500-page book to explain it. The simplicity is what gives it staying power. It's what makes it easy to remember, easy to share, and hard to vary. Simplicity also creates resilience. Complex systems break easily. They require constant maintenance, constant explanation, constant patching. Simple systems endure. They adapt naturally because they don't have unnecessary parts weighing them down. Nature is the best proof of this. The DNA code is incredibly simple, just 4 letters, but from it arises all of life. Simplicity scales in ways complexity never can. Most importantly, simplicity respects people's time and attention. In a world full of distractions, complexity is noise. Simplicity is signal. A simple product or message cuts through the clutter and speaks directly to the heart of the matter. That's why the simplest brands, the simplest interfaces, the simplest ideas often dominate entire industries. They don't ask for more of your attention than necessary. They give you what you need and get out of the way. Simplicity is hard to vary because once you've found the core, you can't mess with it. If you try, you lose the essence. That's why the greatest products and ideas tend to look obvious in hindsight. They're not endlessly changeable, they're definitive. A wheel is simple, and it hasn't been improved in thousands of years because it doesn't need to be. The same is true of any product or idea that reaches that level of purity. So when you're building something, Don't ask yourself what else you can add. Ask yourself what you can take away. Don't ask how to make it more impressive. Ask how to make it more inevitable. When you find that point where the product feels obvious, where it feels like it couldn't be any other way, that's when you know you've created something powerful. That's when you know you've created something simple. And that's the paradox. Simplicity looks easy from the outside, but it's the hardest thing to achieve. That's why simplicity creates power, because once you reach it, you've tapped into something universal, something timeless, something that can't easily be varied. And that is what makes good products unforgettable. Authentic value is irreplaceable. You can copy style, you can copy design, you can even copy business models, but you cannot copy the essence of something that truly delivers unique value. That's why good products feel inevitable, and once people experience them, they can't imagine life without them. Authentic value is not built on marketing tricks or temporary hype. It's built on solving a real problem so well that the solution becomes part of the fabric of daily life. And when you hit that level, no competitor, no amount of imitation can take it away. Consider Twitter in its early days. On the surface, it seemed almost laughably simple, 140 characters. No pictures, no long posts, nothing flashy. But that constraint was the authentic value. It allowed people to communicate instantly, concisely, and publicly in a way no other platform offered. If you took away the character limit, it would lose its identity. If you tried to change it too much, you would dilute what made it valuable in the first place. That's the test of authentic value. It becomes hard to vary without breaking. When a product has authentic value, it creates habits. People don't need to be reminded to use it. They don't need constant advertising campaigns. It simply becomes part of their life. Think about something like email. It was never marketed to us aggressively. Nobody had to convince us with slogans to send messages digitally. It just solved a problem so directly, so clearly, that it spread like wildfire. That's authentic value. It embeds itself into the rhythm of how people live and work. The key is that authentic value speaks to fundamental human needs, not temporary desires. A new gadget with flashy lights or a trendy app with gimmicks might grab attention for a little while, but it doesn't last because it doesn't touch something deep. A truly valuable product goes straight to the core of human experience. It makes life easier, faster, more meaningful, or more connected. Once you've experienced that, you don't want to go back. That's why authentic value is so powerful. It creates dependence in the best sense of the word. Not addiction, but reliance. It becomes infrastructure for your life, and once a product reaches that level, it is irreplaceable. Competitors may try to copy it, but they'll fail because they're copying the surface, not the essence. Look at WhatsApp. It succeeded not because it was the first messaging app, but because it did the simple thing. Free, fast, reliable communication. Better than anyone else. It didn't add unnecessary features. It didn't complicate. It focused on delivering authentic value. Today, billions of people use it, and even if competitors appear, the habit is so ingrained that replacing it is nearly impossible. Authentic value also scales differently than artificial value. Artificial value relies on marketing budgets, branding campaigns, or status signaling. It fades as soon as attention shifts. Authentic value doesn't depend on attention. It depends on truth. If something genuinely makes people's lives better, word spreads naturally. Every user becomes an advocate, not because they're paid, but because they actually benefit. That's why some of the best products in history grew virally with little to no marketing. The truth of their usefulness carried them forward. Another key element is that authentic value survives time. Trends come and go, but genuine solutions endure. Think about the wheel, electricity, the internet. Each one is so embedded in our reality that we forget their inventions. That's the highest level of authentic value, when something becomes invisible because it's too essential to even think about. That's what every great product should aspire to, not just to be used, but to be relied upon so completely that it feels like part of the environment. This is why founders and creators should obsess over value, not perception. It's tempting to chase branding, press, or funding, but all of that collapses if the product doesn't deliver. A mediocre product with great marketing might get attention for a while, but eventually people see through it. A great product with authentic value, even if ignored at first, will break through eventually because you cannot suppress the truth forever. Authentic value also creates trust. When people sense that something is built not to exploit them but to genuinely serve them, it builds loyalty. And loyalty is the rarest currency in business. You can buy attention, you can buy downloads, but you cannot buy trust. Trust only comes when people feel that you are giving them something real. Once they trust you, they'll forgive mistakes. They'll stick with you through rough patches, and they'll spread your product by word of mouth. That's the compounding effect of authentic value. In the end, what makes authentic value irreplaceable is its alignment with reality. Fads try to bend reality to fit perception, but authentic value conforms to truth. It is simple, it is direct, and it is undeniable. That's why the best products don't need to be endlessly varied, and why the companies that create them tend to dominate their fields for decades. When you're building something, ask yourself not whether it looks impressive or sounds exciting, but whether it actually matters to people. Does it solve a real problem in a way that no one else can easily replace? If the answer is yes, then you've tapped into authentic value, and once you've done that, you don't need to worry about competition or hype, because authentic value is like gravity. It pulls people in naturally, and once they experience it, they don't want to let it go. That is why authentic value is not just important, but irreplaceable. Truth scales better than marketing. Most people don't realize this because the business world is obsessed with attention. Everywhere you look, companies are spending billions of dollars on ads, influencers, slogans, and campaigns designed to trick you into looking their way. But here's the reality. Marketing can buy attention for a short period of time, but only truth sustains it. A good product, a real solution, will grow on its own because people trust it, use it, and share it. Marketing may create the spark, but truth is the fuel that keeps the fire alive. Think about the companies that dominate our lives today. Google doesn't need to run commercials to remind you to search. Apple doesn't have to explain why people line up for their products every year. Tesla doesn't spend billions on ads, yet it's one of the most valuable car companies in the world. Why? Because the truth of their products, the usefulness, the design, the performance, spreads faster and wider than any marketing budget ever could. Once people experience the truth, they tell others. And word of mouth, amplified by networks, is the most powerful scaling force in existence. Marketing, on the other hand, is inherently limited. It requires constant spending, constant reinvention, and constant noise. You can vary slogans, tweak designs, run endless campaigns, but all of that is surface level. If the underlying product is weak, the truth will eventually come out. No matter how much money you throw at marketing, you can't scale lies forever. People will abandon a product that doesn't serve them, no matter how clever the pitch. That's why truth wins in the long run. The beauty of truth is that it compounds. Every person who discovers genuine value in a product becomes an advocate. They don't need to be paid. They don't need a campaign. They just tell their friends, share their experience, and the cycle repeats. This is why startups that obsess over product rather than promotion tend to succeed. If your product is great, your users will market it for you. The truth becomes the marketing. That's the most scalable strategy there is. We live in a time where distribution is nearly free. Social media, messaging apps, and digital platforms allow anyone to share experiences instantly with millions. This means truth spreads faster than ever before. If your product delivers, it will find its way into the hands of people who need it. On the flip side, if you're hiding behind marketing and your product is weak, people will expose it just as quickly. Reviews, ratings, screenshots, videos, all of these amplify truth. And truth, unlike marketing, doesn't cost anything to sustain. There's also a psychological layer to this. People don't trust ads. They know they're being sold to, but they do trust their friends, their communities, and their own experiences. When someone you know recommends something because it genuinely worked for them, that carries more weight than any commercial. This is why authenticity has become the currency of the modern era. Marketing creates noise, but truth creates trust. And trust is what scales. Another way to understand this is to look at the difference between brand and reality. A brand is a promise, but a product is proof. You can spend years building a brand, but if the product doesn't deliver, the promise collapses. The opposite is also true. If the product delivers, the brand builds itself. Amazon is a perfect example. Jeff Bezos famously said, "Advertising is the price you pay for having an unremarkable product." Amazon didn't become dominant because of commercials. It became dominant because it was relentlessly focused on truth, faster delivery, wider selection, lower prices. That truth scaled until Amazon became the default. Truth also has another advantage. It doesn't need to be varied. Marketing campaigns constantly change to chase attention, but truth stays consistent. A wheel works the same way today as it did thousands of years ago. Electricity powers our world just as it did when it was first discovered. These truths don't need slogans, they don't need persuasion, they just work. When a product reaches that level of truth, it becomes a standard. People stop questioning it and simply use it. That's the highest form of scale. Creators often forget this. They get distracted chasing virality, chasing impressions, chasing trends. But virality is fragile. Trends fade, truth endures. The companies that stand the test of time are the ones that focus on being undeniable rather than being loud. They build something so real, so valuable, that ignoring it is impossible. Once you've experienced the truth of a great product, you don't want to go back. No competitor can talk you out of it. That's how truth scales, through permanence, not through noise. So if you're building something, remember this. Don't ask how you can market it better. Ask how you can make it truer. Does it really solve a problem? Does it really matter to people? Is it something they'll use, love, and share without you having to convince them? If the answer is yes, then you've tapped into something unstoppable. Because once people discover the truth, it spreads on its own, and that's why truth scales better than marketing, because truth doesn't need to be sold, it sells itself.